That's a wrap. Wait, I mean, that's got it going.
Got it going. It's not a wrap yet.
It's not a wrap just yet. We still got a little bit.
A little bit. There's the disclaimer. That's the rest of it. There we go. Got started. Welcome back, folks. I'm John Najarian. He's Pete Najarian. Jared, our trusted, I suppose.
Maybe. We hope.
We hope. The trusted gentleman who puts up all of the stuff that you guys see on the screen here. We get a lot of that.
The technician.
Thank goodness. But we do get that.
Yeah.
And we're really pretty happy to have Jared here doing the job, folks, that he does.
Thank you. Because
he gets the stuff up for us, which is
right.
important every day. And, God bless him. So I know Mark sent me something about the Wejo read, but I don't have it here. No, wait, there it is.
Oh, God. You know what? What the hell?
I got it, Pete. Today's Rebel Edge Venture Minute features Wejo, the leader in vehicle mobility data. As our loyal viewers know, data is the new oil, and companies like Wejo that stake an early and meaningful claim to this explosive industry are poised for success. Wejo is unique in the data industry. They license treasure trove of data generated by today's connected vehicles and analyze that data in a variety of forms for a number of customers, including municipalities that use the data to improve emergency response times, mitigate traffic congestion, reduce overall carbon emissions. Wejo is publicly traded on the NASDAQ under WEJO. And in full disclosure, I am a shareholder. To learn more about how Wejo is the leader in mobility data, please head over to www.wejo.com. All right, Pete, that's the only interruption, and we certainly do appreciate it.
Well, but I will say this. I'll say this. There was somebody that at one point in time you and I worked with who used to say the data don't matter, which was idiotic, but also, yes. So apparently with what you were reading, the data does matter. Is that right?
The data does matter.
Yeah.
And you can only imagine, if you have vehicles sitting there idling, Pete, burning carbon and putting CO2 up into the atmosphere, and you can possibly avoid that because of some of this connected data. And I don't just mean, the likes of various mapping things that we all use like Waze. This is pretty critical stuff, and it's virtually every vehicle made since probably 2020 has this connectivity, and some prior to that. And Wejo buys that data and then analyzes it and distributes it. It's pretty cool stuff. All right, let's start off with the Macro Minute. Macro Minute, Jamie Dimon says that the banking crisis, at least this part of the banking crisis, Pete, is over. What do you think?
I think there's at least one more left, John. I think that, as we said from day one, there is no one-day events, and there are no one-stock events either. And obviously, we've seen Signature, we've seen Silicon Valley, now we've seen First Republic. And I'm not saying we absolutely have to have more, but I think that there's a possibility that there's still somebody out there not doing as well as maybe first thought. And I think I say that because of the fact that there's still a lot of real estate out there, John, that's very concerning when we talk about cities that have 30% of buildings that are occupied and stuff like that. I don't know that we're through that whole thing yet. I'm going to give you one real quick macro minute. How about this one for me? Bitcoin. Bitcoin's down well over 1,100 points or thereabouts. In the last couple of weeks, it has not been back above that 30,000 level. That is something to keep an eye on because alternatives are always interesting to keep your eye on. And I think this one specifically is telling us something right now.
All right. Well, what about, Pete? Fantastic futures.
Fantastic futures.
I'm pretty sure that you could squeeze in a little bit of that into the fantastic futures, Pete. But I'm going to say Kappa because Dr. Kappa, just like the guy that said the data don't matter, but we call Kappa Dr. Kappa because it's got a PhD in economics.
Might be the dumbest statement that ever goes on TV on a very consistent level.
It's not just one person, it's a whole bunch of idiots that say it. But copper's up 14% year to date, folks. 1% more just today. What do you got, Pete?
I'm going to throw out silver for you, John, and here's why. You want to, everybody says there's no volatility in the market. Actually, there is, but I'll tell you about this one. How about silver? The fact that since the start of the year, it's only up 5%. That's really not a whole lot. That's true, but it's up 21% just off of those March lows. And when you look at it today, it got all the way up over 26, got to 26.20, and then pulled all the way back again. So there's a lot of ways that you can get involved in precious metals. A lot of trading going on in the CME, a lot of trading going on out there. I think that silver right now and gold, which is flirting with being well above 2000 and below 2000, that's moving around as well. So there's a lot of movement in other parts of the market right now.
Agreed. Well, that's it for today's Fantastic Futures.
Fantastic Futures.
There we go.
That's two, Terry. Count them two.
Two.
All right. Let's talk about ASCEND, Pete. ASND. Up big today. The FDA completes a response letter related to the manufacturing and control strategy for a delivered dose of their drug. And anytime you're getting out of phase 3 trials, Pete, and you get a note from the FDA that's positive, you are freaking celebrating. And I'm sure the shareholders, as well as the insiders in this company, are celebrating this achievement.
Yeah, absolutely, John. I think people have the right reason to be excited. We can also say this: the stock was on its rear end. It was getting hit towards the lower side of things. And then all of a sudden today you get this big move to the upside, 18%. That's what they need. They need not just that movement, but they need for their phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, all these different things that we talk about all the time. They've got to get up there to the FDA. They've got to get that approval. Once you do, things do start to flow a little differently. We'll talk about something that's happening today later on as well, because that's exactly what is going on. But this one certainly is promising, John. Very, very interesting and well-deserved. And look, we really love it when we see some of these names in healthcare when they're getting things done and the pipelines are moving, because somebody out there needs these drugs, needs these treatments and so forth. And for goodness sakes, I think it's the greatest thing in the world when we start to see some of that roll through. And we're seeing a lot going on in healthcare right now. 2023 has been a big year.
It has, Pete. And hyperthyroidism is what they're going after for treatment with this particular drug that's worked its way through phase 3 over there at Ascendus. All right, let's talk, Pete, about ISEE. This one also up big today, to be acquired by Astellas for $40 a share. That's phenomenal, obviously. And the companies have entered into this binding agreement, meaning that there's probably some significant penalties for walking away and all that sort of thing, Pete. So this isn't just a let's throw a bid out there and see what they respond. This is an agreement by the companies. And unless somebody else came in even close, this is a done deal. It's just a question of timing before it gets to that upper level where, like I said, the takeout is $40 a share.
Yeah, Iveric is really interesting, John. Matter of fact, it's taken out that 52-week high, all-time high levels. So this is something that's really big. And the dollar amount, big dollar amount, $5.9 billion all-cash deal. There's a lot to be said for that. They have a pretty decent balance sheet, and they've actually got one approved drug, John, which is great, but they've got a couple more in the pipe. So that's something as well. And that's an area, this is an area where the focus really from Estella was, hey, look, we're just going to add this to our tool belt, and it's going to be something that we can snap right on. It's exactly what they're going to be doing. So it really gives them the upper hand when it comes to anything in the eye world. And that's exactly what both these companies do. They really are excited about things, and certainly looking at where that stock popped to today, it says a lot about people thinking, you know what, it's going to happen. This is the right kind of a move. It's a big bite for Estella when you really look at their balance sheet as well, John. But nonetheless, almost $6 billion deal. And we've talked about these time and time again over the last couple of months, whether it's Merck or somebody else out there buying. We are seeing a lot more of this consolidation in the healthcare world.
And just as Pete says, we've talked about it, folks. We've also had unusual activity in it. So ISEE, 2 Fridays ago, Pete, unusual activity, May 33 calls. This past Friday, the 28th, we had unusual activity in the May 36 calls. And since it's a $40 takeout, both of those are going to be big winners. The biggest one, of course, the 33s, because at $7, and it won't be completed by May, folks. So I understand that you'll have to take your money, those of you who followed what we had for unusual activity, you're going to have to take the $38. What a shame.
Yeah, it's really a shame. I was going to say that has to happen though, because these things take months, oftentimes longer, a lot of the time, but that $40 number is a great number, but 38, that ain't so bad either, John.
Yep. It closed. It was around 32 on Friday, Pete. Yeah. So to all of you who made a big killing there, boom, we salute you.
We salute you.
Following the smart money. All right, let's talk, Pete, about TGTX, because this is another one of those frequent flyers. They reported a loss of 28 cents. Not good, but it was half of what they were expected to lose. Revenue came in at almost 8 billion versus 2 billion, Pete, year over year. In other words, they're going from lower left to upper right on revenue, and they're cutting their burn on their profits, because again, it's not a profit, it's a loss, but it's a much smaller loss because of this fantastic revenue generation.
Yeah, and that revenue coming from their MS drug, John, and that's something that was approved back in December, which is fantastic. I mean, the company is really working hard, trying everything they can. Again, I mean, we are loaded with therapeutic type companies, whether it's drugs or whatever, and it's wonderful to see. By the way, this company's got a few more in the pipeline as well that are going to be coming out over the next year and a half or so, because they're a little bit deeper. They're in phase 1, John, and those phases take quite a long time to get all the way to that FDA approval. But they've got approval for one, and it's going to be great. This stock, new 52-week highs, all-time highs, $29. Not a bad run to the upside for this one as well.
Yeah, this is pretty dang sweet. When you see these kinds of moves, folks, you just sit there and say, well, did somebody know? Maybe. Because as Pete and I say, somebody always knows. The question is, did anybody act on it?
Right.
When I did a quick scan, Pete, of our unusual activity for TGTX, yeah, it's been on there a couple times. Most recently, though, the options expired. So people had been playing, waiting for a move like this, but their timing was off. And that's one thing with options, folks. The trade-off with options is time, because you're perpetual if you buy the stock, meaning you're in it until the stock's not there anymore. But with an option, you've got to be right on your timing. And if you missed it by a month or a day, because you could miss it by a day, you don't get that big ride that people are getting in TGTX today.
Right.
All right, what about this one, Pete? VLY. This one, adjusted earnings, 30 cents a share. They missed the street estimate. Bottom line improved, but it only improved by a single digit, 7%. That's a single digit. Results nonetheless were hurt by an increase in expenses and various provisions. That's why VLY is getting kicked to the curb today, Pete.
And 52-week lows on top of that, John. I mean, the stock is getting kicked for all the right reasons. You just read it off. I mean, whether their costs are going up, there's a lot of different things. But I would also say this, the one last thing that's really hurting these guys is something we just talked about earlier on, which is you look at their real estate exposure, John. The commercial real estate exposure that they've got certainly puts them into a very difficult spot, because we all know what's going on, and we are seeing that people just are not going back to work in that manner, or at least the companies themselves are not filling up all of this office space that they once did. And that is going to become a problem. And I think that's really at the beginning of some of our next problems is going to be who's got exposure to this, who's got that commercial exposure to all these towers in every one of these big cities. And there are some specific companies that'll come to mind for a lot of us. And I just wonder, John, how are they doing? And if they're doing well, how are they doing well right now? Because there's a lot of questions to be asked, and I'm not sure we've got great answers right now.
Yep, I would agree, Pete. Well, and that's Valley National Bank. You see the symbol. Jared was nice enough to have all these symbols prepared for you folks. So we like to recognize that. Thank you, Jared. Pete, let's talk a little bit about the draft, because now it's in the rearview mirror. It's behind us.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that you had predicted came to be, and some of the things that I think were surprising. Hendon Hooker, for instance, that was a little bit of a surprise, wasn't it, Pete?
It was. And I tell you, John, there are certain teams, and you and I were going to maybe kick around some of what went on in that draft. I will mention this, John, because I'm going to go back to this time and time again, because I caught all kinds of grief from a couple of bozos that should know a lot more about TV ratings. So I'm going there again. So I'm not saying how many people went to the draft, although it was a hell of a lot in Kansas City if you watched it, a hell of a lot. But it has nothing to do with that. It's TV. It's TV ratings. So here's what I got for you. NBA, 12-year highs. You know what that means, John? 4 million people are watching the NBA. Do you know how many people in the playoffs, critical time, and this is 12-year highs. You know how many people were watching this? If you go to this one spot, John, there were a total unduplicated audience of 34 million. Now, if you go by the standard thing, it's 12 million. Either way, we're talking about the draft, which is just a bunch of players sitting around and showing off the bling when they get up there, doing this little number. You know, you got to do that when you get up there. But it was unbelievable. So they had an incredible audience. They do an unbelievable job. I mean, that's one thing that Roger Goodell and all his predecessors started to move on to. And the draft is just another one of those monster events, very much like a Super Bowl. It's just incredible because people know these guys and they know of these guys and they're just waiting. And we've been talking about them forever. So I gave you an opportunity, John. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers might have had the best draft of anybody. And I'll give you my reasons why. They drafted on need and best player, because that's a very important thing. So last year, they took Kenny Pickett, a great quarterback out of Pitt, stays right there. This year, what do? You try to protect that guy just a little bit more. They got Broderick Jones from Georgia in the first round. They got a cornerback who's 6'3". His father played in the NFL, Joey Porter. This is Joey Porter Jr. from Penn State, a corner who's 6'3", 200, long, lean, and can run. That seems like a pretty damn good draft pick to me. Then they got a kid out of Wisconsin, a defensive tackle, last name Benton. Very good player. They also got a linebacker you and I talked about as kind of like, hey, this kid's kind of a sleeper, Nick Hegbert. Now, outside linebacker, Wisconsin, nobody really knows him, but all the kid does is sack the quarterbacks, make a hell of a lot of tackles, and never stops running. So they did pretty well. Oh, and I forgot one other guy. They took the tight end from Georgia, John, who might be the guy that might be one of the bigger sleepers out there. Well, he's only 6'8" and 275 pounds with a 7-foot wingspan, who can catch the ball if they throw it to him. Last year, they didn't throw it to him. Why? Well, because they had the number one tight end in all of football, who's only a sophomore out of Napa, California. And that kid just lit it up, right? He's got speed. He can run routes like a wide receiver. He's got the size of a tight end. And Georgia's got a guy at every single position. So this guy was a backup to him. I think Darnell Washington is going to be a hell of a tight end, John. So it's going to be fun. Was there anybody that you were excited about? I was excited about your Bears. You're protecting your quarterback. That's big.
Yep, I was too, Pete. But I'm going to say Philly. But yeah, as far as Darnell Wright, that offensive tackle to protect Fields, that's a nice pickup. Yep. They got a big guy on defense, Gervon Dexter Sr.
Yep. Yeah.
I bet Gervon Dexter himself is pretty scary dude too, because this Gervon Dexter Sr. is pretty damn stout. I think the Bears had a very good draft, Pete. Yeah. So I would probably give them an A- or something like that. But Philadelphia Eagles, because we're talking about a Super Bowl team, Pete, and for them to have the second best draft, here's what I'll say: Jalen Carter, we talked about him extensively. D tackle. Nolan Smith, edge rusher. So they've got two big defensive players coming in that I think can start for years. Offensive tackle, Tyler Steen or something like that, Pete. Sidney Brown, safety. Cornerback, Ringo. Quarterback, Tanner McKee. I mean, they had a great draft. So if you're one of our friends in Philly, you're probably very happy today looking over that draft list. I don't think anybody booed a single one of those picks.
No,
but I'll guarantee the Jets, they booed a lot of those picks.
Yeah, I will say this. I thought the world of what Philadelphia did, and there's one other team that did an amazing job, was the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions are a team that people don't really recognize where they're going and how fast they're going to get there, John. I mean, they can say all the crap they want about these guys. They went out and got the big linebacker. They went out and got all the positions. They got a running back. Everybody says running backs aren't really worth that much. Well, that's usually said by a team that will not ever run the ball, so everybody knows they're going to throw it, and then all of a sudden you get a good pass rush, and the game's over. You're going to win. The Vikings on defense can't figure out anything. They completely screwed up the draft. They went for a freaking dwarfy little wide receiver, John, and corner. Both of them can't run. These guys, there's defensive linemen that weigh 320 pounds that run as fast as these two guys that they drafted. It's unbelievable to me. I think we'll move on to the next one, John. Otherwise, we'll get too far along. But I'll tell you this: the Jets. I'm amazed at what they were able to do, in my opinion. Now they get boos. Everybody gets boos. They had that wonderful kid. If you saw him, the Make-A-Wish kid, he walked out there in the first round and he got all excited. He was his Jets, Jets. Great kid. I'll tell you, John. So Aaron Rodgers sat in Green Bay for I don't know how many years where they wouldn't give him an lineman, they wouldn't give him a receiver, they wouldn't give him anything, right? And each and every year, everybody just says, well, Aaron's just complaining. No, Aaron's giving you the reality of it all. So he gets to the Jets. Now, the Jets kind of fooled around with their very first pick. But after that, John, they got the center from Wisconsin. Anybody who knows the football team at the University of Wisconsin knows one thing. The offensive line is what moves that team. That's why they're always good. They always have good ones. They grabbed the center from there. He's unbelievable. They got an offensive tackle from Pitt. They got a running back from Pitt. They gave him what he really needed, John. So in a lot of ways, I think that they're going to be really excited. But I wanted to mention one other kid for you because this kid's cool.
Okay.
He's from Old Dominion, who, by the way, probably had as many draft picks this year as many Big Ten, Pac-12. I mean, just amazing what they were able to do and put in the draft. They got this kid, Zach Kuntz, okay?
Yeah.
He's 6'8", 255-pound tight end. He runs the 40 and 4.55, which is faster than many of the corners in the draft. He's got a 40-inch vertical, John, and he was in the 7th round. He was the 3rd pick. Now, if you look at him, you're going to go, wow, his numbers look pretty crappy for 2022. It's because he got hurt. You go back to 2021, John, he had 73 catches. This kid is amazing. He's big, he's athletic, he can block, he can do whatever, and he's one more piece to add to the whole thing, and it gives Aaron Rodgers another target, another blocker. He's gotten everything that he wants. So if he doesn't have a good season, John, he's going to have to look at one thing, the mirror, to find out what's wrong, because they gave him everything he wanted. They got his receivers are there. They brought him from Green Bay. They did everything they wanted, and he should have a great year. And I think the Jets, with the defense and now what they've done on offense, it's going to be really interesting this year.
Yep, and I do not disagree with you, Pete, about Kuntz. That kid was a beast, and I like the way he bows his neck whenever he's, they're taking pictures of him. He bows his neck like that and so forth. He's a big, tough kid, but not the same cockiness as Will Levis. I loved Will, and I think you liked his prospects.
Yeah.
But, as he started to slip down further and further, people were, just kind of staring at his girlfriend and wondering, well, maybe she's the high round pick. But yeah, this guy, Kuntz, his father played, Pete, at Maryland. His brother played at Penn State. So this is not a guy that's, it's not exactly the Matthews brothers and the family, but it's still a pretty good pedigree when you've got that many people that played D1 ball. So yeah, I like it. And I think that kid is going to do some damage, especially for those jump balls, Pete. When that ball's high, those little 5'10" D-backs are going to have a hard time defending a true 6'8" tight end.
Yep. Gonna be fun. Gonna be fun. Jets, Jets, Jets.
Jets, Jets, Jets. All right, folks. Well, now we can say it, Pete. Episode 145 in the bag.
She's in the books, in the bag. Here
It's
we
in
go.
the books. We will be back tomorrow, folks, at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll see you then. Have a great day.